Picture this: America's most beloved late-night host, the man who made millions laugh every single night for 30 years, harbored a dark secret that would shock his most devoted fans. Behind Johnny Carson's warm smile and twinkling eyes lived a man so unforgiving, so ruthless in his vengeance, that crossing him once meant career suicide. Tonight, you're about to discover the 5 guests who learned this lesson the hardest way possible. And what they did was so unforgivable that Carson erased them from television history forever. But here's what will absolutely blow your mind. Some of these so-called unforgivable acts were so seemingly innocent that the celebrities had no idea they had just signed their own professional death warrants. We're talking about a man who operated like a mob boss in a Midwestern sweater, someone who never raised his voice but could destroy lives with surgical precision. And the most heartbreaking part? The person who hurt him the most was someone he loved like a daughter. Joan Rivers wasn't just another comedian who appeared on The Tonight Show. She was Carson's hand-picked protege, the woman he personally groomed to be his successor, the daughter he never had in the comedy world. For years, Johnny opened doors for her that had been slammed shut on every other female comedian in America. He gave her his platform, his endorsement, and most importantly, his trust. Rivers would later say that Carson was the first powerful man in television who never asked for anything inappropriate in return for his support. He championed her purely because of her talent, and she was deeply, profoundly grateful. That's what made what happened next so devastating that it literally broke Carson's heart and created the most vicious feud in television history. In 1986, Fox offered Rivers something that seemed impossible: her own late-night show competing directly against Carson with a salary of $10 million a year. But here's the kicker that will make your blood run cold. Rivers was terrified to tell Carson about the offer because she knew it would feel like a betrayal. She kept putting off that conversation, hoping to find the perfect moment, the perfect words to explain herself. That perfect moment never came. Instead, Carson learned about her defection not from Rivers herself, but from a headline in Variety magazine. For a man whose childhood was marked by emotional abandonment, this felt like the ultimate betrayal. According to witnesses, Carson went completely white when he saw that headline. He didn't scream, he didn't throw anything. He simply said 4 words that would haunt Rivers for the rest of her life. "She didn't even call me." Then he walked into his office and did something that still sends chills down the spines of everyone who worked there. Carson immediately ordered that Rivers' name never be mentioned on The Tonight Show again. Every clip featuring her was removed from compilation shows. It was as if she had never existed in Carson's world. When Rivers tried desperately to apologize, sending letters, gifts, and calling his private number, each attempt was met with complete silence. The packages came back marked "Return to Sender." The calls were never returned. Rivers said it felt like screaming into a void, and the pain of losing Carson's friendship was worse than losing the professional opportunity. But Rivers' story was just the beginning of Carson's reign of terror. Wayne Newton discovered that threatening the king of late night physically was a mistake that would cost him everything. Newton had been the target of Carson's jokes for years, particularly about his Las Vegas image and what Carson called his suspiciously youthful appearance. The jokes were relatively mild, but they hit a nerve with Newton, who had spent years carefully crafting his public persona. The breaking point came when Carson made suggestive jokes about Newton's sexuality, implications that could destroy an entertainer's career in that era. What happened next became one of the most notorious backstage confrontations in television history. Newton didn't call or complain through his manager. He showed up in person at NBC's Burbank studios and bypassed security to march directly into Carson's office. Newton entered without knocking and found Carson reviewing that night's monologue cards. According to Newton himself, he told Carson, "You can make fun of my music, you can make fun of my hair, but if you ever make another joke about my sexuality, I'll kick your ass." For Carson, who had built his career on fearless comedy, this direct physical threat crossed an unforgivable line. Carson stood up very slowly, using his height advantage, and without raising his voice simply said, "Get out of my office before I have you thrown out." Newton was immediately and permanently banned from The Tonight Show, a ban that remained in effect for Carson's entire 30-year tenure. The consequences were devastating for Newton's career, as losing access to The Tonight Show meant losing the most important publicity vehicle in American entertainment. Then there was Shelley Winters, the two-time Oscar winner whose explosive behavior created one of the most shocking moments in Tonight Show history. Winters arrived for her 1975 appearance, seeming disoriented and noticeably slurring her words. Carson tried to guide her gently through the interview, but Winters kept interrupting and making comments that didn't connect to his questions. You could see Carson getting increasingly tense, though he maintained the appearance of a normal conversation. The moment that changed everything happened when Carson made what seemed like an innocuous joke about Winters' weight, something she had addressed humorously in previous appearances. This time, her reaction was dramatically different and absolutely explosive. According to witnesses, she just snapped. One second she was laughing, and the next second she had thrown her entire glass of whiskey, ice cubes and all, right into Carson's face. The audience gasped in horror. Carson, drenched and clearly shocked, maintained enough composure to quickly call for a commercial break. But his famous self-control vanished the moment those cameras stopped rolling. He stood up dripping wet and walked off the set without saying a word, his expression absolutely murderous. Winters was quickly escorted out of the building, and Carson personally banned her for life. Charles Grodin thought he was being brilliantly subversive with his confrontational comedy act, but he had no idea he was slowly poisoning his relationship with Carson. Unlike most guests who came prepared with amusing anecdotes, Grodin played an aggressively difficult version of himself, challenging Carson's questions and acting vaguely hostile toward the host. At first, Carson recognized what Grodin was doing and played along brilliantly, creating uncomfortable comedy through tension. But what had begun as light sparring evolved into increasingly hostile exchanges, with Grodin questioning Carson's interviewing skills and suggesting he didn't care about his guests. The problem was that to viewers at home, it often looked like a genuinely uncomfortable interview with a difficult guest, and the line between performance and reality became dangerously blurred. The breaking point came during a 1990 appearance when Grodin's act veered into territory that struck too close to Carson's personal insecurities. Grodin began mocking Carson's delivery and questioning whether he actually cared about any of his guests or just went through the motions for a paycheck. Carson's smile got very tight, the kind of forced smile that everyone who worked with him knew meant he was not amused anymore. Finally, there was Truman Capote, the brilliant writer behind Breakfast at Tiffany's, whose 1975 appearance became one of the most uncomfortable episodes in Tonight Show history. By the time Capote appeared, he was in the midst of a devastating spiral of alcohol and drug addiction. You could tell something was wrong the moment he walked out. Capote was unsteady on his feet, his speech was slurred, and his eyes couldn't seem to focus. As the interview began, Capote's condition became painfully obvious. He struggled to complete sentences, occasionally lost his train of thought mid-word, and made several inappropriate comments that couldn't be aired on network television. Carson tried every interviewing trick in his considerable arsenal, but nothing worked. The breaking point came when Capote began telling a rambling story that veered into explicit territory inappropriate for broadcast standards. Carson quickly interrupted and threw to commercial earlier than scheduled. During the break, he confronted Capote directly, saying very quietly, "Truman, you're not well tonight. We're going to cut this short." When the show returned, Carson quickly wrapped up what should have been a 10-minute segment after barely 4 minutes. Each of these 5 individuals learned the same brutal lesson. Johnny Carson never forgot, and more importantly, he never forgave. Their careers were forever changed by a man who smiled warmly at America every night while wielding the kind of power that could make or break lives with a single decision. And the most chilling part? Carson felt completely justified in every single ban, believing that respect and professionalism weren't just expected on his show, they were absolutely non-negotiable.